Candles flicker. When nights grow long, we come together under these lights. A team, united by purpose. Fans bound by passion. Each holding a small flicker of hope in their hands. At SportsGrid, we believe that even the darkest nights can't dim the unity we share. One team, one stadium, one shining moment. This holiday season, we shine brighter together. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results.
What? How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Blocked well and tries to cut through the middle. Oh!
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Pop one of those gold coins in there. Oh, baby!
Welcome into Sports Millions over on the grid. I'm Joe Madden, joined by Tom Vecchio. Tom, we've got a great show today, and we're going to kick it off with the matchup between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So much on the line for both of these teams. Seeding here for the Steelers, and then we look at the Bengals, a must-win situation for their playoffs hopes, but they also need Denver and the Dolphins to lose, so they're going to need some help in this one. Are you excited for this matchup?
I am. This is certainly shaping up to be one of the best matchups, not just of Saturday, there's only two, but of the entire week. You know, we're dealing with a varying degree of effort from these teams. You know, they need to win. Someone else needs to lose. We have teams that are playing for maybe draft positioning, whatever it might be. So a huge slate of NFL action to close out the week. We'll obviously get to the rest of the games, but I'm ready to jump in, and I'm expecting an absolutely awesome game between the Bengals and the Steelers.
Yeah, I think we're in for a great one here. Let's start looking at the quarterbacks. Let's start with Russell Wilson here of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, there's a lot of picks that we can look at for him. We have his passing yards, his rushing yards, his passing touchdowns, passing completions, as well as passing attempts. Which one of these do you want to dive into, Tom?
I think for me, it would have to be the passing yards for Russell Wilson. And, you know, we've seen some ineffectiveness from Najee Harris on the ground over really just the majority of the season. Like, he's certainly been good, but he hasn't been great. And at the end of the day, the Bengals defense, especially their secondary, is terrible. And we've seen it here, not this year, but week after week, opposing quarterbacks putting up big yards against them. And Wilson did that earlier this season when they were in Cincinnati. So I think the yards would be the safest spot to go for Wilson. You could certainly look to the passing completions just because I expect them to be able to move the ball down the field, as we saw with Bo Nix. Granted, that game went to overtime last week, but it's got to be yards for Russell Wilson. Like the passing touchdowns is okay. The rushing yards, maybe. But I think the yards with Wilson is my favorite. What about you?
Yeah, I love looking at his yards here. 224.5 is the number we're getting. I do think it goes higher than that. And I'm with you, not looking at the passing touchdowns. We know Russ has turned it over in the red zone. And I do think we could see the Steelers try to run those touchdowns in so they don't have those issues in the red zone there. So Passing yards, I do like. I also like his pass completions. I do think Russ can go higher than the 20 and a half pass completions. That number just seems a little low in a game that is just so meaningful for both of these teams out here. Tom, let's talk Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow has a lot of ways we can look at him. We know offensively the Bengals need him to just be on point in this game. Those connections out there with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase need to come. His passing yard number is coming in at 289 and a half. Can he go higher than that? It's high, but probably not high enough for Joe Burrow.
It's very high. Like you said, 289 and a half is not a number we normally see for quarterbacks. I'm most interested in essentially waiting on the news for Chase Brown, not Jamar Chase, Chase Brown, their running back who didn't practice as of Wednesday, obviously has been their lead back. So, if he's out or he's going to be active but not fully healthy, like this has to be a big Joe Burrow game because they would be down to Khalil Herbert and Travion Williams as their two backs. Which is probably not the spot you want to be looking. So I think it will be Joe Burrow passing yards. And even if they fall behind, they're going to have to pass the ball. And fully healthy or not in the backfield, like just getting the ball to Chase and Higgins in the pass game, that's the best route to success. And we've seen the Steelers defense take a bit of a step back over the past few weeks. So it has to be Joe Burrow. Now, we can get into the receivers and the running backs for other sides, but it really feels like quarterbacks might be the safest option for either side in this game.
It really does. I'm expecting both of these quarterbacks to really have strong days out there. I think this is going to be a competitive battle between these two teams, Tom. Both teams really wanting the win. Are you concerned about Joe Burrow and his wrist at all? I know there's been issues with that wrist, not 100% out there. I still think even if he's not 100%, with his ability to throw that ball, he can go over the 289 and a half.
I mean, we have seen fantastic stuff from him. What is it, 7 games in a row now with 250 passing yards, at least 250 passing yards and 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns, whatever it is, setting an NFL record. Like the wrist may be an issue in the grand scheme of things, but it's actually not affecting him right now. So we just roll with Joe Burrow, who maybe should be in the MVP conversation, maybe.
Yeah, I was hoping we would be able to get his passing touchdowns higher than even 1.5 because of just what you just said with how strong he's been able to do that. Let's look at who he's going to get that ball to. We got T. Higgins and Jamar Chase in this matchup. Who do you think will be his prime target out there, Tom? Because I love what we've seen out of both of these guys. We know either can go off in any given game. Steelers will have the biggest problem with which one of these guys. I think probably the biggest problem with Jamar Chase.
I do too. I would love to see his total receptions. That's just not posted right now. We have 92.5 receiving yards or the half receiving touchdown. Higher on the receiving yards is the way to go. I would personally love just to see the receptions. Now, we do see receptions for T. Higgins listed at 6.5 and 77.5 receiving yards. Chase, at the end of the day, is the receiver that he trusts. We're talk about all the connections that they had at LSU, et cetera, et cetera. But time and time again, I think Chase would be the spot to go. If you're not going to Joe Burrow on the Bengals side of things, remember, you'll only choose one player from each team. If you're not going to Joe Burrow, I think it would be Chase.
Okay, I'm with you. I really do think it will be Chase in this one. We do have an interesting kicker number here for Chris Boswell. We know how impactful he has been for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He has 1.5 field goals. You could take that higher or lower, or 7.5 kicking points higher or lower. I think I like the higher than 7.5 kicking points in this one because I do expect Russ to be able to convert those touchdowns out there on the board. I think this is less of a field goal game for him, even though I could see him going higher than 1.5 field goals. I just like those kicking points a little bit more, Tom.
Okay, so 7.5 kicking points would be, I mean, he's got to have at least one field goal in the mix there, right? So they're not going to score 8 touchdowns. So I would say I would have to lean field goals. Okay. I understand the argument for kicking points. It could be, he could have 2 field goals and then the touchdown. You need 2 field goals or 3 field goals for the kicking points. I think field goals made is a little bit easier. The question is, do you trust him over Russell Wilson? Like if Russell Wilson is putting 50 yards, do we just go with that easier route than trying to specifically nail down Boswell kicking points versus field goals made?
I definitely think it's better to look at the quarterbacks here. So then the kicking points. What about Najee Harris? So we need to talk about him. We need to get him in the mix. He's so strong out there for the Steelers, and you got to expect a big game out of him. His receiving yards coming in at 5.5. So that's a very low number there for him. But we know he's traditionally used in that running back role. 44.5 rushing yards. We know the Bengals defense doesn't put up much resistance. Can he go higher than that? I think so.
I think you can go higher on probably all of them. You know, if we're being honest about it, like you said, the Bengals defense, not good this year. They haven't been good down the stretch, giving up a ton of yards last week, as we just saw it to Denver. I don't think there's a wrong answer for Najee Harris. Now, I would prefer to take receiving plus rushing. I would certainly rank that number one. But if someone specifically likes just rushing yards, they think the Steelers are going to be out ahead. That's, you know, you could easily go there. But I certainly want to lock in and keep it just very simple. Both quarterbacks. Joe Burrow, when it comes to the passing yards, and I actually like Russell Wilson on the passing yards as well. I would put the passing completions slightly behind that, higher than 20.5 passing completions. I think both teams move the ball through the air.
Well, Tom, it sounds like we're thinking exactly alike today. I'm going to lock in both of these quarterbacks for their passing yards as well. I'm expecting big days out of them. I think this is a game that has the ability to even go to OT. I think it's that tight of a battle as both of these teams fighting for, well, the Bengals for their lives and the Steelers out here for their seeding. So I'm locking in Russell Wilson higher than 24.5 passing yards, 224.5 passing yards, and Joe Burrow's higher than 289.5 passing yards. So you guys, we'll be back in the next couple minutes. Don't go anywhere. Browns versus Ravens. We're going to dive in next here on Sports Millions on the Grid.
As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
They may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today. They cover.
So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
You basically predicted this, saying that if Texas, as expected, as nearly a 2-touchdown favorite, did beat Clemson, the odds were telling you they were only 10 cents behind Oregon entering the opening round.
I still feel that Oregon's one of the best teams in the country. You want to give me now from plus 350 to plus 480? I think it's great value. I think they match up very well against Ohio State.
College football today, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
You don't want them to go 13-0 and then lose the first round of the playoffs.
Red.
This is their last shot. They don't really have anywhere else to go yet.
Hot take.
By the time I hit, I guess what, Route 33 up here, that ticket's cashing.
Only on SportsGrid.
I don't like to toot my own horn, and I know that I'm setting myself up for probably disappointment later tonight, but I hope you were with us last week on the Final Five, because we almost swept the board. We had 2 out of 3 on the power play points with Reinhardt and Matthews. We hit the goal scorer line A. We hit the side with Washington. We hit the total with the over in Toronto and Buffalo. So we had a really good Final Five last week, and I'm hoping that we can now ride that wave.
Only on SportsGrid.
Pop one of those gold coins.
Welcome back into Sports Millions. I'm Joe SportsGrid, joined by Tom Vecchio. We're going to jump into the Browns versus the Ravens, but first, enjoy Sports Millions Pick'em that hate making picks yourself? Well, Sports Millions has you covered. Head on over and play Sports Millions Blitz'em right now and let the computer do the work. Go to sportsmillions.com/blitz'em to be able to win big prizes without having to make a single pick yourself. That's sportsmillions.com/blitz'em. Okay, Tom, we're going to jump into this matchup here with the Cleveland Browns taking on the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Ravens still need to lock up that divisional title. Can they get the win versus the Cleveland Browns, or are the Cleveland Browns looking to play upset? Maybe looking, but can they do it?
The short answer is no. The Ravens will come away with this victory. And like you said, they still technically need to win in order to lock up the AFC North. Now, the question becomes is how much will these players actually be playing if they get out to a 21-24 type of lead in the first half, as we've seen the Browns offense really fail to score over the past 2 weeks. They have a total of 9 points over the past 2 games combined. So I think this is a spot where we may actually see some of these players hit the lower on some of their yardage totals just because they may not be playing into the third or fourth quarter. So, at face value, taking Derrick Henry saying, 88.5 and he's going up against the Browns, that's a spot that he could go for 100. Well, he may not be playing as the game winds down. So very interesting to break down. I'm ready to go.
Tom, are you seriously saying we're going to look at some lowers in this segment? I haven't taken a lower as of yet. Have you?
I think there have been some when we're talking about specific players in out of reach matchups, but I wouldn't mind the argument for a Derrick Henry lower than 88.5. That's just not the spot I want to go, but I understand the theory behind it saying, listen, they're going to get out and score 21 points in the first half, and then it's just, hey, let's pull our starters, let's rest them all. So with that said, the one player that I trust the most is actually maybe more one of their more inconsistent players. That'd be Zay Flowers, higher than 58.5 receiving yards. So I understand when people look at his game log, they're going to see these games up at 100, these games down at 20, back up at 80, down at 30, whatever it might be. We saw on Thursday, Zay Flowers was announced to the Pro Bowl for the Ravens. He was the first receiver ever for the Ravens to make the Pro Bowl. So Zay Flowers goes out, has a big first half against a terrible, terrible Browns secondary, and then everyone gets pulled in the second half. That's what I'm ultimately expecting. I will say there's an argument to be made for Mark Andrews, for Derrick Henry, who we see break off these 50, 60-yard runs. He could legitimately hit higher than 88.5 in like 3 carries. I just want to go with a little bit of a narrative. And again, a spot that the Ravens still need to win.
I like where you're looking there. 58.5 receiving yards for Zay Flowers just seems a tad too low. And like you said, he could come out so strong. All these players get pulled in the second half and he can still go higher than that number. Mark Andrews, I'm thinking the same as well. We saw him in that big breakout run on Christmas Day. It didn't look the prettiest out there, Tom, but 36.5 receiving yards is his number coming in. I'm expecting him to go higher than that number. I definitely think he get that on 2 passes from Lamar Jackson. So I really do like Mark Andrews higher than his receiving yards in this one. What are your thoughts on him?
Totally on board with that. It just comes down to how many players on the Ravens will be hitting their highs, because I don't think it will be everyone, right? Again, in the first half, what we're expecting. So I'm on board with Mark Andrews. I will say later in the week, as we do see more lines posted for these players, Lamar Jackson only has 209.5 passing yards posted right now. If later in the week there's a rushing yardage posted for Lamar, I would actually be interested in the lower than that, because let's just keep him safe, right? They shouldn't be too many designed runs. He shouldn't be scrambling too much. We're 1 week away from the playoffs type of thing. So I wouldn't mind, again, the argument for Lamar Jackson. Hey, don't go out there and scramble too much. Don't take any unnecessary hits. And that could force him to just hitting the lower, just because they want to keep things as easy as possible on their star quarterback.
Well, absolutely. I like that as well. I like Derrick Henry lower than that rushing yard number of 88.5. And let's look at Jerry Jeudy here of the Cleveland Browns. Jerry Jeudy will want to put up some big numbers here against the Baltimore Ravens. His receiving yards is 48.5, but can he do it with how poor this offense is being? I don't know, Tom. It's dangerous here.
I actually really like Jerry Jeudy this weekend. Let's just call it what it is. He has been their lone bright spot this year. the quarterback issues, the quarterback changes, the injuries. Nick Chubb, obviously starting the year, wasn't healthy. Then he comes back. He's not looking like himself. Then he gets hurt again. Granted, DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson for the Browns hasn't been amazing, but Jerry Jeudy has put up a really good season despite all of this. So let's end the year on a bit of a high note. And I do have faith, especially if the Ravens do pull some of their defensive starters later in the game. He'll be going up against backups just based on volume. I think Jerry Jeudy can get there. So I'm willing to lock in Jerry Jeudy higher than 48.5 receiving yards. And then I'm just going to trust Zay Flowers higher than 58.5. Again, I liked a little bit of a narrative that he was selected to the Pro Bowl. And again, Ravens still do need to win this game.
Yeah, that is a great narrative there. We do have a couple other players we can look at just really quick. Elijah Moore here for the Cleveland Browns, receiving yards 22.5. It's a low number here. I think he'd go higher than that. Justin Tucker for his kicking points out here for the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens can get up in this first half. I could see that second half resulting in those field goals. So 8.5 is his number. I actually really like that to the higher, Tom.
That's probably the game script, right? They scored touchdowns in the first half, so he's not racking up a ton of kicking points in the first half. But then if their offense gets stalled in the second half, because we do see Lamar and Zay Flowers and Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, all these guys being pulled, then they would be settling for field goals when they're in a spot to control it, when they're already up by, 20 some odd points. So absolutely on board with Justin Tucker. And he's been better as of late. The middle portion of the season, he was very inaccurate, but things have turned for him. He's looking better.
He needs to be able to come out strong in this game going into the playoffs. He does not want to be missing those field goals. So I'm going to lock in Justin Tucker higher than 8.5 kicking points. And then I am going to lock in Elijah Moore here for the Cleveland Browns higher than 22.5 receiving yards. Tom, what are you locking in for the game?
I'm sticking with Jerry Jeudy and Zay Flowers. It's 48.5 for Jerry Jeudy, and then it's 58.5 for Zay Flowers. Really, Jerry Jeudy should be able to get there even in the fourth quarter, whatever it might be.
Okay, you guys, we are coming up against a break, but don't go anywhere. When we get back, we're going to be breaking down the matchup between the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers over here on the grid. We'll see you in the next couple minutes.
As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
They may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today, they cover. So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred or just worked on the side or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Pop one of those gold coins.
On the grid, myself, Joe Madden, joined by Tom Vecchio. Tom, we're going to jump into the matchup between the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers with seeding implications here for the Packers.
Yeah, big game coming up for the Packers. But before we hop into that, check out the Sports Millions social casino featuring classics, slots, and brand new game concepts. The social casino features the opportunity to win large sweepstake coins, and the games are always free to enter. Go play now at sportsmillions.com/social-casino. That's sportsmillions.com/social-casino. And Joe, like you said, there are seeding implications for this between the Packers and Commanders, the 6-7 seed, the 5-6 seed for the NFC. What are your overall thoughts on this? Because I think the Packers need to come out and show something on offense. If we look back to last week with their matchup versus the Vikings, the Packers didn't look good for 70% of that game, 80% of that game, and they finally turned things, on in the fourth quarter. But I think they need to come out and build that confidence heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, they absolutely need to build that confidence. And I do think we're going to see a big workload out of Josh Jacobs on the ground. But I do think Jordan Love has to come out strong in the passing game in this one. Now, they're lucky, I think, building that confidence against the Chicago Bears. We know the Bears are eliminated from the playoffs. And I do think this team, with what we've seen out of their defense as of late, will allow the Packers to put up the points. Are you seeing it going that way as well, Tom? Or do you think this Bears defense can turn it on and give the Packers a hard time in this game?
I don't. I really don't. I think this game has to be, from the Packers side of thing, again, building that confidence going to the playoffs. They showed great signs of life, but it was just too little too late last week against the Vikings. So they come out and score early, and that will largely be led by Josh Jacobs. That's probably my favorite spot to go, considering the lack of consistency we've seen from the Bears' rush defense, especially dating back a couple weeks when Jahmyr Gibbs ran all over them from the Lions. And then when it comes to the Bears, we have a lot of different options we can look at on offense with the three different receivers, the running back. But, man, Caleb Williams ending the season, at least on somewhat of a high note, is what I want to buy into. Been certainly a very up and down year for the Bears, but he's been better in the second half of the year. So I want to buy into Caleb Williams, at least putting on a good performance to end the season, albeit in a losing effort.
Oh, I love that narrative there for him. We're looking at a couple different things for Caleb Williams out here. Passing yards, we've got 200.5. We could take to the higher or lower. His rushing yards, we know he's able to scramble. He gets that pressure. The offensive line allows that pressure to come through, and he has to scramble. So 21.5 is his rushing yards. And then, Tom, I love looking at the target that I do think he will be getting that ball to, which is Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen are those veteran hands out there that he knows can get that separation. Keenan Allen receiving yards 53.5. I love that to the higher. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, Keenan Allen, absolutely. That is the go-to option. DJ Moore, we often see a lot of short passes, and he doesn't necessarily pile up a ton of yards. We see these quick passes, as you said. The offensive line doesn't always give him a ton of time, and he often has to get the ball out quickly. So DJ Moore is more interesting from a total receptions, while Keenan Allen is more interesting from receiving yards. But, man, Caleb Williams, 200.5 passing yards. I think I'm taking that to the higher. It has to be, again. Swift has been good this year, but I think Caleb Williams, at the end of the day, wants to put up a good performance and at least have some silver lining to go into the offseason saying, listen, if you just give me time, and give me a better offensive line and better play calling, they can at least do something with that.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so you're going to go with Caleb Williams. I'm going with Keenan Allen. For the Packers, Josh Jacobs or Jordan Love. It comes down to the two of those guys. For me, I love Jordan Love, but it's got to be Josh Jacobs. His receiving or rushing yards, 64.5 to the higher. If you want to look at his receiving, we know he's used in that option as well, 12.5, but it's the ground game that I'm looking to play higher, Tom.
It's absolutely the ground game. And 64.5 is a reasonable line for Josh Jacobs. Obviously, this is building into the fact that they may be pulling their starters. I would expect it to be just a touch higher if it was a normal season game at week 10 or whatever. But Josh Jacobs to the higher, 64.5. Caleb Williams higher than 200.5 passing yards. Packers take care of business in the first half. Maybe they pull some of their starters. Maybe Malik Willis comes in for Jordan Love. So I would trust Josh Jacobs the most.
Okay, this should be a great game. So that's what you're locking in. I'll lock in Josh Jacobs higher than 54.5 rushing yards, and Keenan Allen higher than 53.5 receiving yards. You guys, thanks for joining us here today on Sports Millions on the Grid. Tom Vecchio and myself will be back shortly. Have a great day.
Pop one of those gold coins in there.